Lowe's has the Labor Day deals you need to give your home a new look. Buy one, get one free select interior paint via Visa gift card rebate. Then, add the final touch with 2 for $8 on select 2.5 or 3-quart mums. Refresh your home and save big while doing it. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 9/3. Mums offer in-store only. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. More terms and restrictions apply. See Lowes.com/rebates for details.
When we're wrong, don't think that that's a failure, because what we learn from that and what that knowledge will then apply to future techniques, tactics, or campaign efforts is going to ensure that we build efficiency, depending upon their goal, revenue growth, increase in profitability, reduce cost per order.
Step into the world of success with your brand amplified, the ultimate podcast designed to unravel the intricacies of thriving businesses. I'm your host, Annika Jackson, and I'm on a mission to uncover the stories, strategies, and secrets that have propelled entrepreneurs and business leaders to success.
I feel like whenever I meet somebody in the human gathering that I then bring on the podcast, I always open with that, and this time is no different. Jason, Brigham, we met and had conversation a few months ago, hit it off, and I knew with everything that you do and that you've done in your career that you'd be a perfect guest for your brand amplified. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here as always.
Yeah. Let's talk about your background. I mean, computer science is not necessarily the path to digital marketing strategy.
Not at all. Candidly, it was during my time in college, there was a lot more consideration to what my future career might be and stability and opportunity. And, dating back to, the late 90s and early 2000s, computer science as an industry was exploding, and the market was, very much open for opportunities. And so that seemed like the logical pathway, go to college and, and the typical, plan that you have, go to college, get a degree, and then get a job, and make sure that whatever degree you get, from college is applicable to your job. And so needless to say, that was short-lived. I found out after graduating and, being in my early 20s and working in primarily IT support was how I applied my degree, wasn't really that fulfilling. From a professional standpoint, from a social standpoint, from an emotional standpoint.
Oh, yikes.
I joke because there's been a number of parody, television shows that talk about the experience of IT teams. And did you check to make sure it's unplugged? Of course I did. And can you double check? And oh, sure enough, it's unplugged. It was a lot of those things, and paper jams and basic software updates. And so I found that it wasn't really my calling. And so I actually went back into hospitality. And I spent, both high school and college, working in hospitality, managing restaurants and bars. And, when you're in your early 20s, you're to make friends and create social connections. And that was an easy way to do that. And so I spent a few years in that space and had the privilege to do things like open up restaurants and bars and hotels and all these kind of cool things. And while it was a lot of fun at the time, as I ultimately got married, and then my wife and I decided to start a family, working in hospitality really wasn't, the hours are not really great conducive to being a present, partner and parent. And so it was time to make another career shift. And I had a brief stint helping people who needed to consolidate or basically reconsolidate their student loans to get lower interest rates, which was incredibly fulfilling, to be honest with you, because it was amazing to be able to work with, a lot of people who unfortunately, went to school and came out in significant debt, find ways to basically try to reduce that. And this is obviously well before, the more recent things of loan forgiveness and all those things, which I'm a big advocate for, and think that the people that work hard certainly deserve to be supported in their education and their aspirations. But nevertheless, not to get derailed, to bring that back, that moment in time was brief because things changed, and I was part of a large layoff as they had to reduce headcount and whatnot too. And my neighbor worked for a digital marketing agency. And as I got laid off and was spending some time with my family, she came to me and she said, "Hey, you studied computer science. Like, I think you'd be great for my company." Or what do they do? Internet marketing. I'm like, not really. not exactly okay, but fair enough. Why not? Let's give it a go. And that was my entry into the industry. I joined a company that had really kind of pioneered on a lot of aspects of digital marketing and advertising. This was really just pre Google, and then at the advent of Google expanding into search engine optimization and AdWords and things of that nature. So it was a really exciting time, and it really built my passion for digital marketing and advertising. And the passion really is around the belief that it's always evolving. And so you're always learning something new. There's a new platform, or there's new technology. And I know there's probably a chance we may talk about AI today, but things of that nature where it evolves. And so you're constantly given the opportunity to experience new things. And that's really what's kept me in it. And so, yeah, that's how I found myself in this space. And I've spent over the last 20 years in different roles, within the industry, both on the agency side and now as an independent consultant, really bringing back all of that kind of experience that I've had to date and helping to help brands and mission-driven organizations really find their path and achieve their goals through digital marketing means.
Yeah, I love these pivot points that you mentioned before we get into talking, of course, about AI and all of the wonderful stuff we're talking about today. But because I do feel like we're at this in-between time where people are worried. We don't quite know. We have an inkling. We might think we know which jobs are going away because of AI, but we might not actually know. I know Microsoft just released a study that said, yeah, what we're thinking is probably a little off base because we still need the human who's doing one thing and the AI tool that's helping the human do something, but it's not able to take over the whole process yet. So this is a time when people are thinking, gosh, okay, maybe I'm a computer scientist. Maybe I'm this, I'm that. How do I reskill, upskill, or change to fit the needs of the market today?
Of course, absolutely. And it's I can tell you, I've had this conversation. Sometimes it seems daily, whether that be with my own family, and I have a college, the daughter in college, or with friends in regards to their families and whatnot too. And I think it's still tough to determine. I think my belief and through my experience is that much like the Microsoft report, that the AI technology that's currently available and it's accessible and whatnot is in fact a tool to help facilitate certain things. It creates efficiency and process large amounts of data, but it doesn't replace the human, part of it. And I was just having a conversation with one of my data analysts talking specifically about that and talking about, well, we have Google Analytics data, GA4 data, and we have Shopify data. And we have all these different sources. And whereas AI can help us then organize that data and create, very clean outputs and whatnot too, it really doesn't understand, well, why is this important? And
Exactly.
I love bringing that back. And I love talking about brands that have missions, that have visions, that have values. And there really lies that kind of emotional tie back into the human element of, okay, well, this data shows this. Okay, well, that's great. Well, where's the why? Why does that matter to us? So why does it matter to the business? How does this align back to our goals? And that aspect of it, I think, is incredibly exciting because it's, forcing us to, the kind of idea of right brain, left brain, art and science, right? It's like, okay, we have a tool that can help us be more efficient or manage the science aspect of it, but the art side of things, of understanding the why and the implications of it and how you're going to apply those learnings and those knowledges to something meaningful, whether that be in an ad campaign or in a PR effort or an influencer activation or what it might be. And I think that's the big difference of kind of understanding. And I realize I'm giving you a very specific kind of example when it comes to digital marketing and whatnot too, but I do feel that goes beyond that too when it comes to things like traditional computer science and programmers, and developers. I think it falls into the same grouping for engineering, where again, technology is helping to evolve those industries, but it's at this point in time, I don't believe replacing anybody. And I feel like it is our, responsibilities as being stewards of AI to ensure that, again, we keep that human element, we keep the art and the humanity associated with these different roles, because that helps to then guide them back towards purpose versus result. That makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. You need the data and you need the storytelling.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of organizations don't use their data well, personalized particularly.
Of course. And I think, again, we see it in our day-to-day activities with brands and companies that do use data well. And again, I love that word, personalized and personalization. It's, I think, a big part of what, is exciting about, the capabilities of being able to process large amounts of data to then inform direction. So again, we can be more expeditious in our behavior. So creating a better, unique experience for Annika and for Jason. But at the same time too, I still get a lot of kind of the apprehension, perhaps fear and anxiety. It's like, oh, I don't know where to start, and I'm not sure that AI is the right solution to help support this and whatnot. So, not to say that people's behavior and people's, phobias is going to, create more opportunities for human beings. But I think that's part of the factor that plays involved in that. It's not like there's this massive shift where all these organizations are forced to move into adopting AI technology or things of that nature. There's still a long period of time before that becomes mainstream in organizations and within business roles that it would affect, I think, job opportunities in the job market.
Oh, 100%. I mean, just thinking about a group of my peers who are talking about AI business cases, and some of them, it's as simple as we spend X amount of man hours, woman hours a year or even a week writing presentations. Or we outsource presentations and we're spending X amount of money. So when we're talking about the human capital and the financial investment in that time and energy, how much could you save by moving over to an AI presentation tool that you can still format, right? You can still have all your branding. You can still add things, take things away, depending on what you want to put in. But I'm seeing a lot more of those use cases where it's a big impact for that organization, but to you and me, it might sound like, oh yeah, that's, it's a small thing. Like, yes, switch to AI presentations. So I think it's those things that are kind of the gateway, but people have to get very comfortable with it first.
Absolutely.
So,
well, and I think, and this is some of the feedback, of course, there's a lot of people hear a lot of the negative aspects of, some of the more common AI tools, and they hear the words like hallucinations or, incorrect outputs or false data. And while that is accurate, AI is still very much learning. And, as the bot agent is trying to give you the answer, regardless of whether it's factual or not, because that's its purpose. It is things like that are, I feel like, very process driven. And in that use case you just gave, again, developing these presentations is very process driven. And there's nuances, of course, and there's adjustments. But if, again, you can leverage technology that helps to then streamline that process, speed up the amount of time taken to get 70% of the way there. And then, and again, you still have to have that other 30% of someone going in and adjusting it and tailoring it and making sure it's personalized in a way, to use that word again. But I think that's where, people understanding use cases that are more about how do we improve process by adopting technology, and less about it doesn't have to be AI. And I think AI can, as a buzzword, can have some negative connotation with it, of course. And so much of what we do, I think we don't understand, is driven by AI. So yeah, I think that's exactly spot on. It's like, how can we make this process better, more optimized by leveraging technology? And again, without saying, oh, great, then we don't need 3 other people on staff. We can go down to 1. That's the other, cultural aspect of it too, to be mindful of course.
yeah. Well, one thing that I'm also, that's been top of mind, is some of the ads or some of the organizations coming out. We have, I think it's Doritos, I could be wrong, that has a new ad with Walter Goggins.
Oh, yes.
For sriracha flavored Doritos, and it's kind of a throwback to like retro porn. We have the Sydney Sweeney controversy with American Eagle. And then, previously she sold soap with Dr. Squatch made out of her bathwater. We have Grok over-sexualizing animated, figurines that are supposed to be for kids' version of Grok. And we're seeing this play out at Carl's Jr. bringing back, women eating burgers and bikinis. So we see that. So on one hand, I think, are these trends back to a certain time period of the way that we approached advertising? But then number 2, if you don't have the right people in the room, even if you keep all the people that you have in the room, could AI be used as a second filter to ask those hard questions and make sure that your campaign is really reaching maybe you want the controversy because that's publicity, even if it's negative brand sentiment, right?
I was just going to say that was the kind of a lot of the sentiment that I heard from other industry professionals, specifically growing the Sydney Sweeney, was like, there's no such thing as bad PR. Like, yeah, this was controversial, a creative store, but now everybody knows about it. And it's like, okay, maybe in the old fashioned traditional Mad Men sense of it, sure. Like,
right.
Okay. And you said it, like, are we kind of going back and kind of saying that, social normality and whatnot too, and equality and things of that nature that are are big talking points above and beyond marketing and advertising. As marketers, was our responsibility. And I think it goes back to, as a brand, like, you have to be clear in understanding like your values and what you represent as a brand. And I'll use an example, and it was also very controversial at the time. I worked with a brand who had amicably separated with one of their sponsored athletes. And subsequently, shortly thereafter, in a normal kind of social cadence posting, they actually promoted one of their trans athletes. And while those two things had nothing to do with one another, it wasn't a conscious decision by the brand in order to do that, it created this controversy and says, well, wait a second, like, in this particular sport, you're advocating for, again, don't want to get into the semantics of it, but you know what I mean. Well, this person is no longer part of your brand and sponsored. And the brand, after taking a breath, which I can understand, as many brands do, of like, oh my God, how did this happen? And why did this happen? Quite politely came back and didn't address either one of them, but just represented their values, that we're about inclusivity. We're about everybody having a voice and representing those who may or may not have people advocating for them and advocating for them. And to me, that went back to, we're not going to stop doing what we're doing, but just understand the reason why we did it is about our values, not about these individuals. And so I think that, those are brands that, all right, let's sexualize women, and objectify them. And that's our brand, because that's our values. Our values are this. Whether they overtly declare them or not, like, it's evident by what they demonstrate, right? And so I think it will always be there. And I think there is a little bit of that kind of, in certain instances, that risk taker mentality, that disruptor mentality when it comes to marketers and advertisers, is like, back to, there's no such thing as bad PR. Is like, if I can make a splash, everybody's going to know about this. If I can shock and awe, everybody's going to be thinking about this. And I feel like there's a lot more of that. Not necessarily that there's some sort of, political agenda, or hopefully not, but, trying to, to sway certain favor to certain demographics and things of that nature. So, but it is interesting. And again, I think, to that note, we've also, over the past, really over the past decade or more, see more brands also step up to be all about, really, like, all about change, and Dove, I think, has done a great job as a brand staying true to that. I mean, they launched that campaign 15 years ago, or maybe more than that, but it's been a core part of everything they've done beyond that. They never deviated from that. And I find that so admirable about a brand that said, okay, yeah, this may ruffle feathers, and this may, make people uncomfortable or unhappy, but we believe in it. And we think it's important that we, as a brand, use our platform to promote that, to promote safety, to promote equality, promote, self-worth and whatnot too, which, as a parent of daughters and young women, like, I value immensely, is to have, communities and people that are outside of our family reinforcing those points, because unfortunately, there's a lot of other things out in our world that don't do that. But
oh gosh, there are so many tangents I could go off on right now. But I wanted to get back to thinking about, because on one hand, we say that, machine learning, which is a part of, artificial intelligence, not the generative AI bucket, but we say that the data analysis aspect is really great and we can cull a lot. On the other hand, I'm really interested in the idea of algorithmic bias. And there's so many kinds of bias that can be put in, whether it's from our own intrinsic biases, that we're making the data lean a certain way, whether it's because everything we have is data points. And if you look in the big sum of the world is based on the victors, right? It's based on what we have, but it's not necessarily based on that missing knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you navigate that? And I know that's a little bit deeper question than just looking at one organization statistics,
Truly.
but it could also.
Well, but I think it's such a great question too, because I almost think the question reinforces the importance of the human element, right? You even talk about those intrinsic biases in the absence, of machine model and, AI helping to drive, the efficiency and calling data and things of that nature. You're still having it be driven by prompts. There's the purpose was assigned to the bot before it took an action. And so I think naturally, whether we are aware of them or not, imply those intrinsic biases of, I have all this data. Naturally, I want to see this outcome. Okay. And so back to the idea of and the same idea with kind of the benign, hallucinations and things of that nature that come with, some AI tools and things of that nature. Like if you ask the AI tool, I want it to look this way, it's going to do its best to try to do that. And whether that be misrepresenting information or obviously providing a certain bias or favor to certain data points to give you a better output. And so I think that's another kind of important piece to recognize is that it's the tool in of itself it's always about who's using it. And, it can be a hammer can be a very functional tool, but it can also be a weapon, I suppose, not to make it grim, but, all depends on who's wielding it. And so I think that's, and honestly, like I think there are people that operate the tools that have, and granted, my limited experience is what it is, and I'm not a data analyst, and so I can't speak for them. But I do feel though that, like, again, marketers have a tendency to lean into I want this outcome, and and that's not necessarily always a positive outcome, right? Sometimes failure is the best result because hey, that was a dismal failure and we're never going to do it again, or we have to do things differently in order to affect the outcome that we have. And I think part of that is kind of the kind of experiential side of human marketers is like failure is okay. Like the data and the outputs don't always have to show the best outcome. It shows an outcome, and the less that you try to influence what that outcome is, the more pure your understanding of those results and how you're going to apply it back. It's oftentimes a difficult coaching moment, I think, particularly working like within agencies or, working outside and working for organizations, because a lot of times there's an expected outcome. You're being held to a certain, goal or expected result. And the idea of failure, or the idea that we spent X number of dollars and didn't get the return on investment that we wanted to, this is terrible. What did you do? Like, definitely plays a pretty big factor in influencing how people approach data and reporting and outcomes, right? So again, this is a lot more the psychology of relationship building and trust factors and how to establish, a level of rapport at the onset through things like onboarding and discovery, where there is a lot of kind of like, hey, like, we're not going to be, right 100% of the time. If we're lucky, we're right more than 50% of the time. But when we're wrong, don't think that that's a failure, because what we learn from that and what that knowledge will then apply to future techniques, tactics, or campaign efforts is going to ensure that we build efficiency, depending on their goal, revenue growth, increase in profitability, reduce cost per order, insert other, KPI here type of result, where again, so that's the part where I know I kind of went off on a different tangent talking about the people more than the data side of things, but I do think it comes back to that. Like it's really dependent on who's wielding the tool. Your influence of that tool is going to create an outcome. The more we can limit, personal bias or, even indicating what the expected outcome is, theoretically, there's a better data set to work with, and therefore then you can apply the human lens and kind of the emotional side of things. And like, okay, like, wow, I didn't expect this because, we meant to do this and this is what the data shows. Okay, now I can take it and iterate from there on better insights and kind of actions that can be taken from those insights.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I appreciated that because it is both it's humans and data, right? And so that was, I think you led us down the right road. So thank you for that.
Pleasure, yeah.
And one thing when it goes back to data personalization, I just think a really easy case would be taking a look at people's behavior, their predictive behavior when it comes to your brand and being able to reward them. So if you're sending a birthday email or a special offer because they haven't purchased in a while or whatever it is, you can really tailor it to their purchasing behavior or their intent in the past versus giving them something generic that they may or may not use because it's like, oh, great, they sent me an email, but this is not relevant to my life.
Totally agree. Not to go down to, but I love that point though too, because bringing that back to like your consumer behavior and trends. And I know the topic of AI is kind of the big thing right now, but it wasn't all that long ago that the topic was around privacy concerns, things like GDPR, yes. CCPA, and people unwilling to have their data, owned, hosted by a brand or whatever it might be. And it was interesting because at the time it was all of a sudden, okay, we have to be compliant and there's legal ramifications. And so there's a IT or computer science component to that and making sure that they're compliant with all those standards. But then you started seeing attributes start to basically decline relative to your CRM databases. And what I found really fascinating was a lot of brands kind of adopt is like, hey, like, we know that things have changed. Like we want to adopt, surveys and marketing preferences emails and things that are like, look, like you may not want everything from us, which is fine. And we want to respect and honor that. But if you can give us a little bit more information, we'll give you just what you need. And I love that personalization aspect of it because as a marketer, I'm the mindset of like, I'll tell you everything I want. Yeah, I want the birthday email and I want the seasonal promos. And, because we do live in a world where we receive a lot of information, on our computers, in our hand, in our phone and whatnot. And yeah, I sign up for text messages. Absolutely do. I want that extra 10 or 15% off by signing up for it. Do I look at all the text messages that I get from people that I signed up for? No. Do I unsubscribe from them? Maybe sometimes? Sure. But like in that moment, like I created this unique personal experience with that brand that I valued and was appreciative of it. And so like, again, I think we've gotten to a point now where I think a lot of brands have adopted, like, you don't have to tell us everything, but like, if you want to tell us some of your information, like we'll create a unique experience that's tailored just for you because that's important to us. And I think that's a big connection of creating that personal attachment that a lot of brands I think are doing well.
Yeah. And I'll take it one step further. I was in the UK for a few weeks this summer. And when I would go to a website there, it would get even more specific into if you accept this tracking method or if you push yes to this, then we'll share your information with these interested vendors who are still, I'm buying a train ticket. So maybe it's still something around hotels or travel or experiences between point A and point B, or maybe it's other ways of travel or whatever it is. But it let me know how many companies they would share it with. And I thought that was really, really interesting because I don't see that happening in the United States yet. But
Not
of course,
yet.
We know that there's different, and then this does take us to the AI conversation because, we just had the thing where, ChatGPT, if you created a URL to share, if you wanted to share something with somebody else, it accidentally created a public URL and that was indexed in Google. And so then all the information that you shared was out in the public. If you use chat versus other tools, depending on what tech stack you're using, it may share or it may train on your data. And so we have to be really careful. And I think people are now trying to figure out, how do we still have some semblance of privacy in the context
absolutely.
of AI?
100%. Right? Well, and I feel like it's certainly at the corporate level, like that is even more so now with some of these recent, occurrences. It's like, oh, well, wait a second, our secret sauce or our proprietary data, this, that, and I, having, recently come out of the agency side of things, we did adopt a governance policy relative to the information that we could share with any of our AI tools sponsored by the organization. And that was all based around like, we don't know necessarily, we have some semblance that this could be out there in the public domain or that could be accessible by these engines, which are going to learning, which apply to other things, but we're not really sure yet. And so I think that's yet another reason kind of where this timeline of like, when is AI going to affect things like the job market or certain industries? It's like these moments are just demonstrative of the fact that they haven't really figured out how this tool, this new technology and the implications associated with it and how we're using it. Like, it's a little bit of building the plane while you're in the air type of scenario. And so I do think that's where organizations are going to be a little less, they're going to take a step and be like, okay, well, yeah, we can use this one. We can't use this one and never this one because blah, 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 blah. And if you do use this one, you can only use it for these specific things and specific tasks, which are going to be incredibly narrow and to a point of where some people are going to be like, well, what's the point then? Like it doesn't help me do things that I want to do. So I'm not going to bother doing it. But I think that's a very interesting and kind of very contemporary now it's happening kind of realization that people are finding that's certainly going to make people think twice about moving full steam ahead.
Yeah. Well, you just spoke about some larger companies. What kind of companies do you work with? Are you working with enterprise solutions? Are you working with small, medium-sized businesses or micro businesses?
Yeah. So in my career, I've kind of worked the spectrum of done it all. And most recently, we're predominantly enterprise brands within the e-commerce space and everything from, fashion and apparel, consumer goods, food and bev. And roughly about a year ago, I while that I've enjoyed that and I've worked with some really cool brands and some great opportunities. And, one of the cool things sometimes about working with those brands, you get hooked up with cool swag. So like, I think that's always a big appeal to young people getting into the industry. And it's like, oh, I get to work on this brand and I'll get blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah. But anyway, I had kind of a personal moment where I felt that, while I enjoy doing this and I enjoy working with these brands, I feel like I want to work with organizations that are less driven by profit motivation and revenue motivation and are driven more by purpose and kind of mission. And so with that, I really have been focused on working with either nonprofits or mission-driven organizations whose focus are supporting either underserved or underrepresented communities. It just so happens that it's moved within healthcare and then technology and SaaS and education. And so I've had this amazing opportunity to work with, both nonprofits and brands within the space that are, in my opinion, affecting change in our world. And that's incredibly important to me, is to try to, as I think about, the future and, what I can do, is to hopefully support these brands that are going to make people's lives better or enrich them or create opportunities for them that they, may not otherwise have. And so that being said, my network, I've lots of people within the e-commerce space, and I have plenty of conversations regarding e-commerce, and I'm always happy to do that. But it is one of those things, and I learned this early on when I started consulting, is like, hold true to what's important to you, and take advantage of your community. And as I told a friend of mine yesterday who had asked me about a beach apparel brand that was looking for some help, I'm like, I'm absolutely happy to have that conversation, but I'm like, you'd be much better off if I introduce you to one of my colleagues that is what they do, and they're incredibly passionate about it. Like, if you're cool with that, I'm happy to facilitate an introduction and then make that connection. And so, and it's also rewarding, honestly, personally, because I'm a big advocate of supporting, the people that I care about, not just in my, my family, but my friends and the peers, the people that have supported me throughout my entire career, and making sure that I had opportunities and or guidance and coaching and mentorship. So to be able to kind of pay that forward is real important to me.
Yeah. I want to talk about that shift in your brand then, though, from going from working for somebody else to starting Guna to now shifting from enterprise into more nonprofit, mission-driven, work that might not have the same kind of budgets.
Absolutely. And that's actually, I had this conversation with actually another member of the Human Gathering here today, specifically about, how do you help these, brands, and particularly nonprofits, that they don't really have budget or they don't have marketing. And I actually said that's actually what I try to help them understand, is that, most of the things that they need to do are going to be people and technology, but it's people first. And most of the nonprofits that I work with tend to be rich in people, maybe not necessarily rich in budget. And you have a group of people that are oftentimes very enthusiastic about the mission, the purpose, why they're there. And so much of what I do is, through kind of initial kind of diagnostic, understanding what they have in play, what they don't have in play, what's critical from a technology standpoint to create this enablement. Because what I want to try to do is enable them by teaching, by coaching, by training to be able to execute on solutions that help drive to their goals. And so a lot of what I've been doing recently is helping these organizations either evolve their CRM platform or their marketing automation platform. They're not on Salesforce and Marketing Cloud. Some of them are HubSpot. Some of them are on various things of that nature, but all of which are useful tool sets. And fortunately, most of those organizations that do offer those types of subscriptions to CRM platforms have discounts available for nonprofits and things of that nature, or sometimes freemium versions. So again, kind of keep in mind that kind of cost assessment of like, look, like you're not going to have to spend 30, 130, $300,000 a year. You just need people in process to be able to execute on these things. And then depending upon where they are, like creating those plans, it's like, have you done any segmentation, organized your CRM into any type of meaningful groupings or things of that nature? No? Okay, well, let's do that together. And let's walk through the steps. And I'll either share tools or guides or point them to information in the public domain. And again, the philosophy of like teaching them to fish versus fishing for them. And then building from there, like based on what are our goals. And for most of the nonprofits that I'm working with now, it's primarily donation driven, which I'm like, great, that's lead gen. It's not that dissimilar to e-commerce. I have a whole game plan kind of, playbook that I can share with you. But again, we'll nuance that. And so it's all about kind of creating these incremental moments. I think a lot of my time, honestly, is spent just keeping them on task and on process because it's people. So their time is valuable and this is not their only, typical focus. And so helping them kind of project manage to like, okay, let's set this next milestone. Let's make sure that we can get our audience groupings all wrapped up by August 16th. And then, okay, let's build our first workflow just for the newsletter. And then let's build our workflow for this and let's do that next thing. And so it becomes a lot easier, I think, for people to at least, commit when it's not like, okay, I need to come up with a minimum of a $10,000 or $20,000 monthly retainer, which is going to affect all these other things that we do. And it's like, I want to make sure that we can make this cost effective and meaningful for you. And, again, also the benefit of kind of staying within those groupings, there's a lot of parity. So it's not like you're having to switch your brain into a complete, different arena and be like, okay, I'm going from wetsuits and surfboards to kombucha, and then I'm going to go over here to low-level satellites in orbit, and all of a sudden, which is super fun, don't get me wrong, but you literally have to then turn that moment off and then switch to the next one and things of that nature. So I naturally, there's selfishly a little bit of efficiency for me because there's parity in a lot of things that we do with these different groups, and so it works out well.
Amazing. What is one piece of advice you'd give to any aspiring entrepreneur, somebody who is in that position of like, they know they need growth strategies and real marketing strategies, but they don't know where to start?
Absolutely. This is something that I am so appreciative that was advice that was given to me and was encouraged through my moments. And it actually ties back into joining the human gathering, but connect with people. Don't be afraid to reach out to people and just ask for a connection. I had a conversation the other day and, this person was looking for some guidance. And I was like, well, have you reached out to anybody to talk to about it? I'm like, they're like, no. I'm like, do you know other people that have done similar things? Or, you've seen what they've done and, you would love to give some information. Well, yeah. I'm like, just reach out. Like, I mean, the worst case scenario is someone says, no, thank you, or I don't have time, and you move on. But I'd say for those people, and particularly young people, I've been very fortunate to meet a lot of young people, that are college graduate or college age and looking to get into these industries and whatnot too. And someone's giving them good advice, which is like, go out and talk to people, learn from other people, make those connections, ask people for a coffee or a Zoom call or whatnot, and say like, I would love to learn from you and ask those questions. And I feel like, so much of people aren't always necessarily sharing their experiences in a way that's easily accessible unless they go up and ask them for it. And so it's a hard thing to do. In fairness, like I'm naturally way more of an introvert than an extrovert in my personal life. So the idea of going to like a networking event or like doing LinkedIn outreach or, and this sound terrible, or sliding into someone's DMs, and now that makes me, but like the idea of that is a bit imposing to me and makes me uncomfortable. But I think going into that, knowing that it's okay to be vulnerable, it's okay to be nervous, like you're not asking for something that's, a heavy lift or a significant, consideration for someone else, and make those connections, because I think like making those connections will really truly show you like you have the support community, and, love sharing my experiences with people that ask me about that. And I come back to them and I was like, tell me what's working for you, or like, how did you handle the situation? Because I would love to learn from you. And so keeping that hunger and that enthusiasm, I've always wanted to learn, but don't be afraid to go and do that reach out and connect with someone and say, I just want to get to know more about you.
That's where some of the best conversations come from.
Absolutely.
So Jason, obviously we'll have your website in the show notes. Is there anything special you'd like to tell the audience about what they'll find, or do you have a special offer or an assessment they can do?
Absolutely. So for anybody that's interested, I mean, I guess there's twofold, for anybody in the audience that would like some advice or guidance in regards to their digital marketing strategy or their revenue operations, or really just looking to get more information regarding their tech stack, like feel free to reach out. Guna.co is the website. It's just gone live literally this last week. And so I'm still fine tuning it, but easy way to connect with me there. Also for anybody that, going back to my last point, for anybody that would just like to connect or like to have just a rap session or whatnot too, like feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to book some time. For anybody that's local to Southern California, if you want to grab coffee, it would be doing me a favor too, because it'll help keep me out of my introvert cave and get me out there as well too. So, as far as offers, one thing I'm a big advocate for is helping young people find opportunities. So if anybody's looking for guidance relative to internships or job postings, or is curious about any agencies within the digital space that I have references to, again, feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to make a connection with anybody I have.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jason. And you already gave us some really great advice. Do you have another quote, mantra, verse, poem, family motto that you also use as inspiration?
I do. Right? And it's funny because it's something that's interpreted and used in a lot of different ways, but there's a shared family motto that my father, my brother, and I use quite a bit when we're in a circumstance that may be challenging or stressful or whatnot. And it's, don't worry, just sow it. And it actually came from my mother in I think probably a haze of being woken up in the middle of the night, said to me as a young person. She was an interior designer. She owned her own business for years. She worked long hours building, crafting draperies and upholstery covers and things of that nature. She was always sewing things. And so I shared that with my family the next day. And it kind of became one of those things where it's like, don't worry, just sew. It's like, we got this. Like, don't worry, just sew it. Because it was, and to me, it was, it's something we share. It's a very personal moment in time. It honors my mother's legacy, but it also is that reminder of like, take a breath, like this will all work itself out, and this too shall pass, like, type of mentality. And so I think that's, something that I always encourage, my friends and, my family ones is like, it's okay. Take a moment. Tomorrow's another day. And, there are great things to come. So.
Yeah. Amazing. Fantastic. I love it.
Thanks for listening or watching to this episode of Your Brand Amplified. Don't forget to leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast listening platform. And if you want to learn more, check us out at yourbrangamplified.com.
If you work as a manufacturing facilities engineer, installing a new piece of equipment can be as complex as the machinery itself. From prep work to alignment and testing, it's your team's job to put it all together. That's why it's good to have Grainger on your side. With industrial-grade products and next-day delivery, Grainger helps ensure you have everything you need close at hand through every step of the installation. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.